Alhamdulillah, Alhamdulillahi wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillahi amma ba'd. Once again, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. So, inshallah, we are continuing our discussion on the fundamental themes of Islam. So, just to bring us back in our discussions, in the previous almost 7 or 8 sessions, we primarily discussed one subject. And that subject was that is it irrational to believe in existence of an all-knowing, all-powerful creator who created this entire universe for some purpose? Alhamdulillah, we concluded with a lot of evidence and sound, alhamdulillah, sound rational arguments that this position is a very reasonable position and it has very strong evidence that yes, it is a true position. And I have mentioned in the past as well that there are two fundamental claims of every religion: existence of a deity, a creator, and secondly, afterlife. Now, at this stage, I wanted to mention one thing, that when we enter into the realm of afterlife, we are heavily dependent on revelation. And inshallah, our next session is about the subject of need for revelation, necessity of revelation, and why we believe that this revelation is Quran in our times. Inshallah, we'll discuss this subject in our next session. For now, what I'm saying is that when it comes to the concept of afterlife, we are heavily dependent on revelation, that it is primarily revelation which informs us that life does not end with death. Now, after receiving this information from revelation, especially when it comes to Quranic revelation, it gives us very sound arguments as well, that yes, it is a matter of faith, because obviously no one has ever come back after death who can tell us, and rest assured, no one will ever come back either in future. So we have been informed through revelation, but within this revelation, we are given very sound arguments to establish this point, that believing in afterlife is not a fairy tale. As some people sometimes, they say that, oh, because some people, they cannot achieve much in this life, or they are going through difficulties and hardships in this life. So they started to develop this utopian world in their mind. Okay, if we are missed on in this life, there will be another life and we'll be having a good enjoyment there, and all of that. But inshallah, we'll see today that that is not the case. There are very sound intellectual reasons to conclude that there has to be afterlife. So keep this point in mind, okay, that in terms of afterlife, we are primarily dependent on revelation. We have been informed through revelation that there is life after death. This is our premise. Let's inshallah see that what are those arguments which Quran has put forward. The same thing I mentioned earlier, that God, afterlife, and necessity of revelation. These are the three fundamental pillars of religion. On this slide, I just wanted to clarify that what we mean by afterlife, because obviously people might have a bunch of understandings about afterlife, but what we are discussing here in this session and what we believe as Muslims, what is our belief about afterlife? First of all, that life is not an accident. And by the way, we have established this, all of these first, at least the first 2 points, we have established them in the previous session. Okay, I will not go into that because we have done already that. So life on earth is not accident. We are sent here for specific purpose. And death is not the end of our existence. Rather, it is a deadline to complete our task. And we have discussed that this task is to worship our Creator, to submit ourselves to our Creator. That is our task. So death is not the end. Actually, death is the deadline, that how did we go about our task. And then with death, next phase of life begins with death. And this phase is about accountability, about our choices which we make in this life. And then there would be ultimate justice. When we say ultimate justice, what do we mean by this, inshallah? I will discuss that very soon. And as a result of that accountability and justice, there are two endings: either eternal happiness or eternal condemnation. So this is what we mean by afterlife. The reason I described this on this in the very beginning, because as we know that some religions, they have the understanding of reincarnation, that we keep coming back in this dunya, in this world again and again. It's a cycle of death and birth, death and birth. Islam does not approve this. Let's move on. So remember this point. Look, there may be different approaches. When we discuss the subject afterlife, there may be different approaches. Okay, there's not one single approach. But the approach which I have found very helpful and very productive in my discussion, inshallah, I'll share that approach with you. But I am not claiming that this is the only approach. And I am not saying that this is the right approach. No, it is one of the approaches. But I found this one pretty much, very helpful and beneficial in my discussion. So I begin with this thing. I call this one stage 1, conceivability of afterlife. And I asked the other person this question, that do you think that it is inconceivable that there can be another life after death? And in most of the situations, even though that person is not agreeing with me that there has to be because my position is there has to be afterlife, okay? But I'm asking the other person that do you think it is inconceivable that it is impossible that there can be another life? In most of the circumstances, the answer is no. I'm not saying it is inconceivable, but there's no evidence. Okay, inshallah, we'll move to the evidence, but at least you see this point that it is conceivable. It is not something beyond conceivability, right? So that is my starting point. And then I ask this question, because remember this point. When you discuss with any non-Muslim, it is not just about giving them a lot of information. Sometimes you need to give them some good questions to think about. And as you know, it is a Quranic approach. There are many places in the Quran where Quran is giving people right questions to think. Okay, so always use this approach. Give people right questions to think. So my question is on the stage of conceivability. We are still on the stage of conceivability, okay, or possibility. I asked the person, didn't we come into existence from once being not existing? I mean, who can deny that once upon a time, I did not exist, you did not exist, and then we started to exist? Is that not the case? Obviously, it is the case with every single individual. Now, my next question is, then is it not conceivable that same event can happen a second time? And what is the event? That you did not exist and then you started to exist, or you came into existence. it has already happened. Then is it not conceivable that the same event which has happened once can happen a second time? Think about this. So let's move on. When we came into this world first time, did we choose to exist or did we choose to be born? For example, did anyone ask me or you, hello, mister, would you like to be born? Think about this. We have been thrown into existence without us being consulted. There's no human being walking on this planet with a sound mind who can say, no, 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 I was consulted before I was born. Not at all. When this event of coming into existence happened first time, it was without my choice. Now my question is, if one event can happen once without my choice, why do you think it cannot happen a second time without my choice? Right? So this is my, so first layer, second layer. I'm just building the case under conceivability. At this stage, it is not necessity, it is conceivability, possibility. Okay, let's move on. We came into existence first time from a microscopic drop of water, which we call the sperm. Nobody can deny this. Now, my question is, if we can come into existence from a microscopic drop of water, on what basis anybody can deny that we cannot come into existence from dust? And obviously, this dust contains our particles. Even though if the body is decayed in the graves, it becomes dust. But that dust, even if some animal has eaten someone, even if somebody has, has drawn in somewhere, but its remains are there. They may be in the form of dust, or if some animal has eaten someone, that animal has died. And then that the dust of that animal contains those particles. So what I'm saying is, if we can come into existence from a microscopic drop of water, why is it inconceivable that we cannot come into existence from our dust? I'm not saying it has to be the case at this stage, but what I'm saying is it's conceivable, right? Let's move on. Now, inshallah, in this next point, I'm giving, and this is basically we are approaching the conclusion of conceivability, inshallah, slowly. So in this next point, I discussed that this event, that dead being revived, we witness this event in our day-to-day life. We observe that dead earth being revived through rain and producing vegetation. The same land, it was dead, yellow and barren, but the rain comes and all in a sudden we see that life is coming out, because vegetation is life and this earth was dead. And we know this point that Quran has used this analogy in its text repeatedly, that if dead earth can be revived with the rain, you can be revived in the same way as well. So far, we have not given any evidence at the level of necessity. But if you add up all of these points, at least you can conclude that, you know what, it is not inconceivable that there can be another life. And this was the whole point we wanted to establish so far, right? Let's move on. Okay, now I am concluding the conceivability part, okay? Think, we all affirm that this universe, that is our current existence, came into being. Then what is so irrational in affirming that there would be another existence after this? Because when you believe in afterlife, all you are saying is that as we have this existence, there would be another existence after this. So what is irrational? What is leap of faith here? It is a rational conclusion, right? Now, is it rational? Is it rational to deny the occurrence of an event which has already happened once? I mean, you explain to me that how is this position rational, that you are denying the occurrence of an event which has already happened once. You have witnessed that once, and now you say it cannot happen second time. Is our second creation a big deal for the one who created the heavens and the earth? I mean, look at this gigantic universe. Who are you in this big scheme of picture? Who are you? You are a small thing as compared to this big cosmos. So the one who created this gigantic cosmos, can he not create to you? On what basis you conclude this? So this was our conclusion, that you are denying an event which has already happened once. So this was the conceivability part. You see, because the topic was afterlife from possibility to necessity. So far we are in the possibility or conceivability part. Let's inshallah enter into our next portion. I call this one stage 2 of the argument. Now we are entering into from conceivability of afterlife. Now inshallah we see that there's a lot of evidence to suggest that afterlife is a necessity, right? So first of all, first argue on this topic, first argument. There's a burning human desire for justice, but inability to fulfill it. At this stage, I mostly share with my friends and with my team members this analogy of a child tripped over a table. Those of us who are parents, inshallah, they can see this point, and those who are not yet parents, inshallah, they can also, inshallah, understand this point. So, you know, for example, when our son or daughter, you know, the young ones, let's suppose they are tripped over a table and they fall down and they are crying. And then the parents come and they just give a slap to the table, bad table. You know, they hit the table and they say, bad table. And then this thing gives solace to this child who has no idea about anything. But even this child has the understanding of justice and retribution. Because when you hit that the table in a metaphorical way, obviously, the child becomes happy because he received the justice, right? So what I'm trying to say in this, it may sound be a very simple analogy, but what I'm trying to highlight in this analogy is that this is part of human nature. We desire justice. If something bad happens, we want and we desire for justice, right? Now, here's the argument. On the one hand, we have this deep-rooted desire for justice and fairness. That is one side, okay? But on the other hand, not only we do not see this happening, but also we are incapable of doing this. Inshallah, I'll explain to you that why we are incapable. So this is the dilemma. This is the problem which gives birth to the concept of afterlife. Why? Because you remember, this was the reason that I put up on the first slide, that what we mean by afterlife is a day of ultimate justice and accountability. This is our understanding of afterlife. It's not some fairy tale, okay? So this is what we believe. Now, you see that I have mentioned this point that we are incapable. You may be thinking that, but in some societies, for example, as we are living in these first world countries, for example, Australia or some other Western countries, where at least there's a system of justice and all of that. So we do have ability to apply justice. Let me give you a simple example. If we think of the example of, let's suppose, Hitler, because this is a classic example which majority of the people, they know that he is responsible for the killing of millions of people. Somebody may disagree with the number, but there's no doubt that he did commit a lot of injustice to the Jewish community. So he was responsible for the killing and massacre and ruining the life of millions of Jews. First of all, he was not brought to justice. Number one. Hypothetically speaking, if it was the case that he was arrested and he was tried and he was given the top punishment, which is the capital punishment or death penalty, okay, he was responsible for killing the millions. Even if you have killed him, you have hanged him till death, is it the just punishment? Because he killed millions. And even if you kill in retribution, it is still not justice, right? But he was not given this punishment to begin with. Yes, he did commit suicide, but that was his own act. The people who suffered at the hand of Hitler, they did not receive anything out of his suicide. How can you say that life can just end in this unfair manner? That where there's might is right. If somebody has the power, he can just do whatever he wants to do. So that is our first point. That it is, on the one hand, we have desire for justice, but on the other hand, we are incapable of implementing the justice. And if life just ends like that, isn't it absurd? Is it not bizarre and unfair that some people just happen to be enjoying the life and some people just happen to be suffering, just their bad luck? So this is our first. Yes, I'm not saying that it is some sort of proof, but it is a rational argument. You can call it a moral argument, no problem, but it is still an argument which should, which at least should, because obviously everything is an accumulative case. We are not saying that with this one thing we have established, no, we're not saying that. But it is an accumulative case, and this one point is at least one drop of water towards that accumulative case, right? Let's move on. I gave the same example here, Hitler and Nansen Mandela. I gave two spectrum of this thing, okay? On the one hand, we have this worst criminal, Hitler. On the other hand, we have the people likes of Nansen Mandela. I mean, if you read his biography, and there are movies on his life as well, I mean, look how he stood for a noble cause. And he spent his basically entire youth in a small cell, in a prison. What did he get in reward? If you say, oh, he was acknowledged, so what? He sacrificed everything. And in return, even if you wanted to pay him back, can you ever pay him back? So that is the point here. Okay, I think you can see the point, that there is no justice either in the case of criminals or in the case of good people. Now, I said that just imagine when Hitler was doing all of this, and he just threw a 20-year-old Jewish lady along with her son or daughter in those gas chambers, which they used to persecute the Jewish community. Is it just the bad luck of that lady? I mean, just imagine this point, okay? There was a human being, and she suffered at the hand of this criminal. If there is no such a thing as afterlife, accountability, and justice, what would you say to this lady? Think about this. Another point, like I said before, that there are people who are living in the third world countries. They are our, even if they are non-Muslim, they are still our brothers and sisters in humanity. Okay, even if they are non-Muslims, but they are living in those third world countries. And let's suppose that if they are living very upright and righteous life, And on the other hand, and by the way, I was living in those countries. What it is like to live in those countries, please watch some documentaries, that how some of those communities, they are suffering for for food, at least even once a day, and how some of them are suffering in the deserts for water. Now, if those people, those human beings who are living in those remote places and in those third world countries, and they are living the miserable life, but they are still upright people, they are morally upright people. And on the other hand, someone living in the first world countries, living a luxurious life, and they are just committing all sort of haram and this and that. They just quote unquote enjoying their life. What would you say? Is it just the bad luck of those people who happen to be born in those third world countries, and good luck for those who happen? What is this bad luck and good luck? How would you justify this life? So the point I'm trying to highlight is this. Please pay attention now. This is the nutshell of the whole argument. Without there being afterlife and justice, this life is unfair, absurd, and bizarre. You cannot explain the atrocities of people, the suffering of people, without complementing this life with the next life. Because this life is about test, and next life is about the fruits of your labor. Right? Now, regarding this point, there's a big objection you often face. Objection is that, okay, we agree with you that there has to be justice, no doubt. But if there is a God, why is he not doing the justice right now? Why is he delaying all of this justice for some afterlife, which may be thousands and whatnot years after? Why not now? It's a good question, actually. And this question can be answered in two ways. One is that if we have discussed with the other person about Quranic revelation, then you give them the answer from Quran. And what is that answer? Like I said earlier, I hinted earlier, that this life is an exam. You are sitting in examination center. Okay. And we all know, we have all studied and we have sat in the exam at different levels. And we all know that when you are in the examination center, examiner would not interrupt. That is your time. Those 3, 4, whatever number of hours, they are yours. You do whatever you want to do with your exam. Examiner would not interrupt. Either you're writing a right answer or a wrong answer. That is your time. It will be the result when examiner would mark your sheet and will announce your result, right? So because Quran tells us that this life is khalaqal mauta wal hayata liyabluwakum ayyukum ahsanu amala. Surah Mulk. That this life is a test. It's like we are sitting the 60, 70, 80 years, we are in examination center. And as in the examination center, examiner would not interrupt. In the same way, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our creator, is not going to interrupt in this life. Yes, sometime when people are crossing the limit, he has given this in the Quran as well. That when some people, they are really crossing their limit and they become a threat for the whole of mankind, then he does bring his justice at the hand of some people. He says in Surah Al-Baqarah that if we were not replacing some people with the other, there will be chaos on earth. So that is the point number one, if you address from the Quranic perspective. Okay, now, if you do not want to address from a Quranic angle, you can still address this question. And listen this, inshallah. It is impossible to calculate all the impact of someone's crime or someone's good deed until the end of this world. Let me give you a simple example. Let's suppose that if anyone, they murder a 20-year-old man, and this person has a young family. Now, because the family, they lost their the head of the family, their children have become orphans, and not having the supervision of any male head of the family, the children may go spoil. And it is not something I'm just saying out of thin air. We all know the example where the father or the elder of the family, he died, and because of not having any supervision, the children were spoiled. Okay, and then these spoiled children, they cause corruption, or they cause chaos, they cause suffering to other people, and those other people, because they suffer, their families suffer. It is a ripple effect. And please think about this: the true and full consequences of any good deed or any bad deed can only be measured by the end of this whole story of this life, because it is going to be accumulative. Okay, it is a ripple effect. So this is the reason that justice cannot, it is not, Allah is not doing justice. If Allah would do the justice in this life, that would not be full and ultimate justice, for this very simple reason that you cannot calculate the full consequences of anything until the end of this world. So this is the answer to this objection, that why not justice now. And inshallah, if you have something to ask me on this point, you can ask me in the Q&A session. So next point, our innate knowledge of good and evil. For what purpose? No one can deny that there are things which all human beings, without exception, regardless of the religion, regardless of the ethnic background, all human beings, they deem things to be good and they deem things to be evil. The question is, if you remove God and afterlife from the picture, then the only other way you try to explain is evolution, that we are a product of evolution. Now our question is, evolution says that all human activities, they are basically for two reasons: survival and reproduction. Now we cannot account for our innate knowledge of good and evil just on the basis of survival and reproduction. I give you a simple example. For example, that let's suppose you are hungry and you went to a takeaway shop and you only have $10. And with those $10, let's suppose you buy a burger. And when you are walking out of that takeaway shop, you see somebody who's hungry and he's a poor person. He begs you to give something to eat, right? Now, when this person is begging you to give something to eat and you only have $10, we have purchased this burger, you are hungry, but in this situation, any reasonable person or any person with you can say it's not have to be Muslim, any person with good nature, okay, he would like to share. If he believes genuinely that this person is he is a poor person and he is hungry, what he would do? He would give him some of his burger or some of his food. He will share with this person. Now the question is, how would you explain this act? Because from an evolutionary perspective, this person has put his own survival at risk. Because if he is hungry and he is not feeding his body enough at that time, it is going to, or it may have at least some negative consequences on his health. But why this person is willing to entertain those consequences and still want to help this needy person? Why? So with this may be a very simple one example, but you can think what I'm trying to say. You can see my point, that people are doing things and they consider things good and evil. The question is that why? Why is it? Why do we have the knowledge of good and evil to begin with? Because this knowledge is not required for our survival. So the knowledge of good and evil is there. And we do not see that this is serving any purpose in this life. Then when we look at the narrative of the religion, it says that the reason you are giving the knowledge of the good and evil, so you can be tested. If you do the good, you will be rewarded. If you do the evil, you'll face the consequences. So that is the explanation which comes from religion and afterlife. If you do not take this explanation, then how would you explain that why do we have the knowledge of good and evil in the first place? So this is another drop of water when we are heading towards the necessity of afterlife. So far, one is our desire for justice, right? And second is our innate knowledge of good and evil. Let's move on. Inshallah, we are done very soon. So every single thing happening, every single thing is being preserved or recorded forever. Now, this is not a secret. By the way, I'm not talking about the angels. We know that we have the angels on right and left. But even if you talk from a scientific perspective, whatever you are saying, all of these voices, they are going to stay in this cosmos forever. Every single action which is being done is kind of imprinted on this big blanket of cosmos. It's never gonna go away. Our question is, why every single thing is being recorded? What purpose is it serving in our survival and reproduction? Because understand this point, there are two approaches. One is the approach of religion, which is God and afterlife. And other is the approach of, which is, you can say, a religious approach, in which everything is for survival and reproduction. That's it. All human activities are for this reason. Then our question is that how would you explain that why do we have this phenomena or this mechanism where every single thing is being preserved or recorded? How would you explain this? Right? Let's move on. We're desiring for eternity and happiness, but current world is not supportive to quench this thirst. This is a little bit of philosophical argument. Inshallah, if you can see this, alhamdulillah. If you can't, you can ignore it, no problem. But let me inshallah share what it is. We feel thirsty, right? Bismillah. We feel thirsty and we have water, right? To quench this thirst. Now, the argument here is, it's a philosophical argument, that me feeling thirsty is evidence that water exists. How can somebody have something and there's nothing outside to quench that thirst? In the same way, the argument is this: from day one, from the beginning of time, no matter how far back you go in the history, or even if you talk about the people of today, everyone desires two things: happiness and long life. Right? Nobody wants to die. No sound person, oh, I would love to die. Obviously, there are some good causes or some good objectives when people are willing to give their life, but in normal circumstances, everyone wants to live survival, and everyone wants to live a happy life. But my question is it possible to achieve these two things here, that you are always happy and you will live forever? Is it possible? On the one hand, we have this desire, we have this thirst for eternity and happiness. But at the same time, there is nothing to quench this thirst. So this phenomena is actually linked with the afterlife. Why? Because this is exactly what revelation has informed us about afterlife, that these two desires, they are going to be quenched. You will have a life of happiness and bliss forever. And there will be eternity. There will be no end, right? So this is another point. It's a psychological, you can say it's a psychological point, but it is still a point that we have this desire for happiness and eternity, and there is no way that the desires can be fulfilled in this life. Now, psychological demand inside of us of a better world, which is free of the defects of current. For example, people point out diseases and sadness and calamities. These are the defects, quote unquote, defects in this existence. Now, the question is, if we have this world with all of these defects, why we cannot have a world without these defects, where it's basically, this point is linked with the previous one, okay, but just a different angle for the same point, that it is a psychological demand. It's a human psyche. We are longing for a life. We are longing for an existence in which there are no defects which we find in this existence. So our question is, if we can have this existence with all of these defects, why can we not have another existence without these defects? And inshallah, last point before I end, everything exists in pair. Day, night, happiness, sadness, okay? And even the plants, they have pairs. Male, female. Think about this. All which exists is actually exist in pairs. And then the concept of pair is that each member of the pair, they complement and complete each other, right? In the same way, afterlife is a pair. It is a complement for this life. If everything has pair and complement, likewise is the case of afterlife. This life and afterlife, they complement each other. How? As I said earlier, this life, exam. Next life, result. This life, labor. Next life, fruits. Clear? So, last point is that this concept or belief in afterlife, it is a universally held belief. What I'm trying to say in this point is, it is the default position. We cannot find, so far, there has not been any discovery of any society, whoever existed, without belief in afterlife. Yes, at this point, people can raise an objection that, oh, but some people believe in reincarnation. Some people believe that, when we die, we become the stars in the sky, this and that. No problem. Yes, we agree that people differ. But if people differ on something, does it disprove that thing? Think about this. As an idea, as a concept, that life does not end with death. It will survive, or it will continue in some way, shape, or form. This is a universally held belief. What is the origin of this belief? On what basis you would reject something which had always been held in every single society, and this is the default position? Clear? Now, yes, we could not have been sure about all the fine details, of afterlife. And that is why our Creator has raised prophets and sent books only to affirm which sound mind demands anyway. So yes, we are not saying at all that we can just know every single thing. No, we started with this point that we have been informed through revelation that there is a life after death. Okay. And then when we discuss that concept in the light of our human experience, in the light of our sound reasoning, we come to the conclusion that yes, it is conceivable and actually it is a necessity. Why necessity? Because without an other life in which there would be ultimate justice, this life does not make any sense. It is absurd, it is bizarre if we remove the concept of afterlife. But yes, in order to know all the fine details, we need revelation. And inshallah, in this way, you can see my point that our next session will begin with this point, that if we need revelation, then why we say that this revelation is Quran. Inshallah, we'll discuss from this point in our next session.
Wa alaikum assalam, brother.
وعليكم
وعليكم
السلام.
السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.